Blood dripped from Amara Taylor's lip as the flight attendant leaned in, sneering. "People like you don't belong in first class." The cabin fell silent. What the attendant didn't know, this girl was minutes away from grounding the entire airline, and changing aviation forever. Before we dive into this shocking story of discrimination at 30,000 feet, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed unfair treatment while traveling, and subscribe to join our community of justice seekers. Now, let's rewind to see how this life-changing confrontation began. "Amara, you're the only one I trust with this." Director Benjamin Brooks slid the folder across his polished desk at FAA headquarters. His voice carried the weight of months of troubling reports. Amara Taylor, 38, straightened her blazer and reached for the file. As a senior Federal Aviation Administration inspector with 15 years of experience, she had conducted countless airline evaluations, but this assignment felt different. "Horizon Airlines?" she asked, scanning the documents. "The discrimination complaints have tripled in the last quarter." Director Brooks nodded gravely. 27 formal complaints in 3 months, all following the same pattern. Black passengers being downgraded, subjected to random security checks, denied services offered to white passengers sitting right next to them. Amara's mind flashed to her father, William Taylor, one of the first black commercial pilots in America. She remembered him coming home, shoulders slumped, after another day of being mistaken for a baggage handler despite his captain's uniform. "The airline's internal investigations keep finding no evidence of discrimination," Brooks continued, making air quotes. "We need irrefutable proof. I want you to go undercover, first-class ticket, full evaluation." Amara raised an eyebrow. "Undercover? We need someone they won't suspect is an FAA inspector. Someone who can experience how they truly treat black passengers when they think no one's watching." He slid another folder toward her. "Our makeup department can make you look younger. College student, perhaps." At home that evening, Amara laid out the contents of both folders on her dining room table. Her husband Wesley entered with 2 cups of coffee, concern etched across his face. "I don't like this, Amara. You're deliberately putting yourself in a situation where you'll be discriminated against." Amara sighed, leaning into his embrace. "That's exactly why I need to do it. Dad faced this his entire career, and here we are, decades later, with the same problems." Wesley kissed her forehead. "Just promise me you'll stay safe. Some people get dangerous when their prejudice is exposed." "I'll be professional. Document everything," she promised, fingering the special necklace the FAA tech department had provided, a high-quality recording device disguised as a simple pendant. Later, as Wesley slept, Amara sat at her vanity, practicing the makeup techniques that would transform her from a distinguished professional into a young college student. She thought about the time last year when, despite wearing her FAA uniform, a pilot had asked her to fetch him coffee, assuming she was cabin crew. Or the countless times she'd been questioned about her credentials at industry events. As she applied foundation, Amara made a silent vow. She would remain calm and professional throughout this assignment, no matter what happened. But she would document every violation, every slight, every instance of discrimination. This time, there would be consequences. Her first-class ticket to Chicago was booked for tomorrow morning. Horizon Airlines Flight 1237 had no idea what was coming. The bustling terminal of Washington Dulles International Airport hummed with early morning activity as Amara navigated through the crowds. Her transformation was remarkable, hair styled in youthful braids, subtle makeup making her appear a decade younger, casual clothes replacing her usual professional attire. The weight of her FAA credentials, hidden in a secret compartment of her backpack, reminded her of her true purpose. Approaching the Horizon Airlines premium check-in counter, Amara noticed the immediate change in the attendant's demeanor as she looked up from her computer. The warm smile the agent had offered the previous white passenger cooled significantly. "Good morning," Amara said pleasantly. "I'm checking in for Flight 1237 to Chicago. The agent, whose name tag read Calvin Pierce, extended his hand without a word. Amara provided her ID and boarding pass. Calvin's eyes darted between the documents and Amara's face multiple times. "First class?" he asked, his tone implying she'd made a mistake. "Yes," Amara confirmed with a friendly smile. Calvin's fingers tapped rapidly on his keyboard. "May I ask the purpose of your travel today?" Amara had anticipated this question. "Visiting family," she replied, noting that he hadn't asked the white businessman who checked in before her. "And how did you book this ticket?" Calvin pressed, still staring at his screen. "Online, like everyone else," Amara responded, maintaining her composure while mentally documenting this interaction. After 5 more minutes of verification, during which Calvin made a show of checking and rechecking her information, he reluctantly issued her boarding pass. "Enjoy your flight," he said flatly, already looking past her to the next passenger. As Amara walked away, she observed a white woman approximately her age approach the counter. Calvin immediately brightened, processed her economy ticket in less than a minute, and wished her a wonderful flight. The security checkpoint brought more of the same. Despite having TSA pre-check, Amara was randomly selected for additional screening. She watched as white passengers with pre-check breezed through without a second glance. "Arms out, please," instructed a TSA agent, who proceeded to conduct a thorough pat-down. Amara complied silently, her recording necklace capturing everything. Upon reaching the first-class lounge, Amara presented her boarding pass to the attendant, Margaret Wilson, who squinted at it suspiciously. "Is this your boarding pass?" Margaret asked. "Yes, it is," Amara replied. "May I see your ID again? We need to verify." Margaret's tone made it clear she believed there must be some mistake. After reluctantly admitting Amara, Margaret kept a watchful eye on her throughout her stay in the lounge. Twice more, she approached to check Amara's boarding pass, while white passengers remained undisturbed. Amara noticed a pattern forming. Another black passenger in the lounge, an older gentleman in a business suit, received similar treatment. When he requested assistance with the Wi-Fi, Margaret directed him to read the instructions on the wall rather than helping him as she had done for others. Taking a seat near the window, Amara noticed a white businessman observing these interactions with increasing discomfort. When their eyes met, he offered a sympathetic smile. "Richard Cooper," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Looks like we might be on the same flight." "Amara," she replied, deliberately omitting her last name. "Heading to Chicago?" Richard nodded. "Business trip. You?" "Family visit," Amara said, maintaining her cover. She was careful not to reveal too much, but appreciated having a potential witness to the treatment she was experiencing. When boarding was announced, Amara and Richard walked together to the gate. She noticed how the gate agent smiled warmly at Richard, checking his boarding pass with a cursory glance, while her own was scrutinized once again. As they moved down the jetway, Richard remarked, "Is it just me, or are they giving you a hard time?" Amara gave a small smile. "It's not just you." Boarding the aircraft, Amara was met with the same barely concealed surprise from the flight attendants greeting passengers at the door. Their welcoming smiles faltered when they saw her first-class boarding pass. Finding her seat in the spacious first-class cabin, Amara settled in, feeling the weight of stares from both crew and some passengers. She activated her recording device with a subtle touch and prepared for the next phase of her evaluation. What she didn't know was just how revealing this flight would become. "Welcome aboard Horizon Airlines Flight 1237 to Chicago," announced the head flight attendant, Vanessa Miller. Her voice was warm and professional, but her eyes narrowed slightly as they passed over Amara in seat 3A. As pre-departure service began, Amara observed Vanessa whispering to fellow flight attendants Gregory Scott and Patricia Harris, with occasional glances in her direction. Their conversation, though hushed, was picked up by Amara's recording device. "Did you see the girl in 3A?" Vanessa murmured. How does someone like that afford first class? Maybe she got upgraded? Gregory suggested. No, Patricia interjected. I checked the manifest. Full fare. Vanessa shook her head. Well, keep an eye on her. Amara pretended to be absorbed in a magazine while cataloging every word, every look. Richard Cooper settled into seat 4C, diagonally behind her, offering another friendly nod. The pre-departure beverage service began, with Vanessa serving the white passengers first. When she finally reached Amara, her smile was noticeably strained. Would you like something to drink? Vanessa asked, her tone markedly less enthusiastic than it had been with previous passengers. Orange juice, please, Amara requested politely. We're out of orange juice, Vanessa responded immediately. Water or coffee? Amara glanced at the tray, where she could clearly see several glasses of orange juice. Actually, I can see orange juice right there. Vanessa's smile tightened. Those are reserved. Water or coffee? Maintaining her composure, Amara replied, water, then. As Vanessa moved away, Amara noticed her serving orange juice to a white passenger who had boarded after her. She activated her necklace recorder with a subtle touch, ensuring this interaction was documented. The aircraft pushed back from the gate, and Captain Thomas Jenkins's voice came over the intercom. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Jenkins speaking. Our flight time to Chicago today will be approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes. We're expecting some turbulence as we pass over the Appalachian Mountains, so I'll be keeping the seatbelt sign on for the first portion of our flight. As the plane taxied, Amara reflected on her training as an FAA inspector. 15 years of evaluating airlines, specializing in service standards and compliance with federal aviation regulations. She had conducted hundreds of inspections, but this was different. This wasn't just about safety protocols or service standards, this was about basic human dignity. Once they reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign dinged off, and the flight attendants began their service. Vanessa approached Amara's seat with visible reluctance. How did you afford a first-class ticket? She asked bluntly, abandoning all pretense of professionalism. Amara blinked, genuinely surprised by the directness of the question. I'm sorry. It's just unusual to see someone so young in first class, Vanessa said, her implication clear. Especially someone, like you. Someone like me? Amara prompted, giving Vanessa enough rope to hang herself. You know what I mean, Vanessa replied with a dismissive wave. Student, right? Must have wealthy parents. Amara smiled politely. I worked hard for my ticket, just like everyone else here. Have you ever been judged based solely on your appearance? Comment number 1 if you've experienced prejudice while traveling, or number 2 if you've witnessed someone else being discriminated against. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're standing against discrimination and subscribe to hear more stories of justice prevailing against all odds. Now, how do you think Amara will handle this blatant discrimination? Let's continue her journey. The tension between them was palpable, drawing the attention of nearby passengers. Richard Cooper shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly overhearing the exchange. Well, Vanessa said finally, let me know if you need anything. Her tone made it clear she hoped Amara would ask for nothing. Throughout the next 30 minutes, Amara observed Vanessa providing attentive service to the white passengers, offering extra pillows, checking on drink refills, responding promptly to call buttons. Meanwhile, she seemed to have developed a selective blindness to Amara's presence. When Amara pressed her call button to request water, Vanessa ignored it for nearly 10 minutes before Gregory finally responded. Sorry for the wait, he said, though his tone suggested he wasn't sorry at all. What can I help you with? Just some water, please, Amara requested. We're preparing for meal service, Gregory replied. You'll get water with your meal. As he walked away, Amara noticed him immediately responding to a white passenger's call button, cheerfully bringing a requested glass of wine. The tension in the cabin was building, and Amara could sense it wasn't just in her imagination. Richard Cooper's frown deepened with each passing interaction, and several other passengers were beginning to notice the discrepancy in service. But this was just the beginning. The true test would come with the meal service, and Amara had a feeling that Vanessa wasn't going to disappoint in providing clear evidence of discriminatory treatment. The aroma of freshly prepared meals wafted through the first-class cabin as the flight attendants readied the meal service. Amara watched Vanessa and Gregory meticulously arrange the premium dishes on the service cart, complete with real silverware and cloth napkins. Today's first-class menu features a choice between herb-crusted salmon with wild rice or beef tenderloin with roasted potatoes, Vanessa announced cheerfully as she began serving the front row. Amara observed the care with which each white passenger was served. The thorough explanation of menu options, the wine pairing suggestions, the accommodating responses to special requests. One passenger requested his steak be prepared more well done, and Vanessa personally took it back to the galley for additional heating. The service proceeded row by row. When Vanessa reached the white businessman across the aisle from Amara, she beamed. "Mr. Lancaster, would you prefer the salmon or the beef tenderloin today?" "The beef, please," he replied, receiving a perfectly plated meal moments later. Then Vanessa stood before Amara, her smile evaporating. Without offering choices, she abruptly placed a covered plastic tray on Amara's table. Amara looked down at what was clearly an economy-class meal, a sad-looking pasta dish in a plastic container with disposable utensils. "I believe there's been a mistake," Amara said calmly. "I was told first class offers salmon or beef tenderloin." Vanessa's expression hardened. "I'm sorry, we've run out of the premium meal options." "I see," Amara replied, glancing meaningfully at the service cart where several covered premium meals were still visible. "That's strange, since I can see more meals on your cart." "Those are reserved for passengers with special dietary requirements," Vanessa stated flatly. As if on cue, Vanessa moved to the white passenger seated behind Amara, who had boarded after her. And pleasantly asked, "Salmon or beef tenderloin, sir?" "Beef, please," the man replied, receiving a steaming premium meal. Amara maintained her composure, though anger simmered beneath her professional veneer. "Excuse me, Vanessa," she said, using the flight attendant's name deliberately. "I'd like to know why the passenger behind me is receiving a meal you claimed was unavailable." Vanessa's smile tightened. "As I explained, we've run out of your selection." "I didn't make a selection," Amara pointed out. "You didn't offer me one." By now, several passengers were watching the exchange. Richard Cooper, who had been observing the situation unfold with increasing discomfort, suddenly spoke up. "Excuse me," he called to Vanessa. "I haven't been served yet. I'd be happy to take the economy meal and let this lady have my premium option." Vanessa's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Sir, that won't be necessary. We have our procedures." "What procedures?" Richard pressed. "I've been flying first class with Horizon for years, and I've never seen someone served an economy meal up here." Gregory approached, sensing the tension. "Is there a problem here?" "No problem," Vanessa said quickly. "Just explaining our meal service procedures to these passengers." Gregory looked at Amara's tray, then at the premium meals still on the cart. His attempt to defuse the situation only made it worse. "Listen, honey," he said to Amara in a condescending tone, "sometimes we run out of certain meals. The pasta is actually quite good." "I'm not concerned about the quality of the pasta," Amara replied evenly. "I'm concerned about why I'm the only person in first class being served an economy meal, particularly when I can clearly see premium meals still available." "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable not making a scene," Gregory suggested, his tone taking on an edge. "I'd be more comfortable being treated like every other first-class passenger," Amara countered. The confrontation had now drawn the attention of the entire first-class cabin. An older white woman across the aisle watched with undisguised disapproval, though whether directed at Amara or the flight attendants wasn't immediately clear. I'd like to speak with the senior cabin crew member, please, Amara requested, her voice firm but controlled. Gregory and Vanessa exchanged looks. I'll get Andrea, Gregory said finally. Minutes later, lead purser Andrea Simmons arrived, her expression already set in a mask of practiced customer service that didn't reach her eyes. I understand there's an issue with the meal service. Andrea asked, directing her question to Vanessa rather than Amara. This passenger is unhappy with the meal options available, Vanessa explained, deliberately misrepresenting the situation. Andrea turned to Amara with a practiced smile. I apologize if there's been a misunderstanding, but sometimes we do run out of certain meal options. There's no misunderstanding, Amara replied calmly. I was not offered meal options at all, while I observed every other passenger being given choices. I was automatically given an economy class meal despite paying for first class. Andrea's smile faltered slightly. Well, perhaps there was an oversight. But I'm afraid we can't provide what we don't have. You do have premium meals, Richard interjected. I just watched you serve one to the gentleman behind her, after telling her you were out. Andrea's expression cooled as she assessed the situation. Her next words would prove to be the most damning evidence in Amara's eventual report. Leaning closer to Amara and lowering her voice, though not enough to prevent nearby passengers from hearing, Andrea said, Look, maybe you'd be more comfortable in economy with your own kind. I can arrange to have you reseated. A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Richard Cooper's mouth fell open in shock. Amara looked Andrea directly in the eyes. Could you please clarify what you mean by my own kind? Andrea realized her mistake too late. I simply meant other young travelers, she backpedaled unconvincingly. I see, Amara replied, activating her recording device again with a subtle touch. So you're suggesting I should be moved to economy class in the middle of this flight, despite having paid for a first-class ticket, because you believe that's where I belong? The confrontation had reached a breaking point, and what happened next would set in motion a chain of events that would transform the airline industry forever. I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice, Andrea said, her professional demeanor cracking. You're disturbing the other passengers. I'm speaking at a perfectly normal volume, Amara replied calmly. And I'd like an answer to my question. Why am I being asked to move to economy when I paid for a first-class seat? By now, the entire first-class cabin was watching the exchange. The atmosphere was thick with tension, with passengers exchanging uncomfortable glances. This isn't about where you paid to sit, Vanessa interjected, her voice sharp. It's about your behavior. What behavior specifically? Amara challenged. Asking why I was given a different meal than everyone else. Andrea straightened, switching tactics. Ma'am, if you continue to cause a disturbance, we'll have no choice but to ask you to move to the back of the plane. The phrase, back of the plane, hung in the air, loaded with historical connotations that weren't lost on anyone within earshot. Richard Cooper visibly winced. I'm not causing a disturbance, Amara stated firmly. I'm asking why I'm receiving different treatment than the other passengers in this cabin. Different treatment? Andrea's laugh was brittle. You're imagining things. Am I? Amara looked around pointedly. Everyone in this cabin has been served a premium meal except me. Everyone was offered choices except me. And now I'm being threatened with removal for simply questioning this discrepancy. Richard stood up from his seat. She's right. I've been watching this whole time. She's been treated differently since boarding. Sir, please stay out of this, Gregory warned. No, I don't think I will, Richard replied, surprising himself with his firmness. What I'm seeing is wrong. An older woman across the aisle spoke up. I've been flying Horizon for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this. That young lady hasn't done anything wrong. Andrea's face flushed with anger. If you don't return to your seat and stop disrupting this flight, she said to Amara, we will be forced to divert and have you removed by security. Amara raised an eyebrow. On what grounds? I'd like you to cite the specific FAA regulation I'm violating by asking why I received different service. Andrea was taken aback by Amara's knowledge. You're being unruly and interfering with the flight crew's duties, which is a violation of federal law. Interesting interpretation, Amara replied. 49 U.S.C. Section 46504 covers interference with flight crew members, which involves assault or intimidation. I've done neither. I've simply asked questions. The flight attendants exchanged surprised glances at Amara's familiarity with aviation law. Furthermore, Amara continued, denying service based on race is a violation of federal law under 49 U.S.C. Section 40127, which prohibits discrimination by air carriers. Andrea's composure slipped completely. No one said anything about race. You didn't have to, Amara replied. Your actions have spoken volumes. By now, several passengers had begun recording the interaction on their phones. Andrea noticed and her expression darkened further. Captain Jenkins will hear about this, she threatened, storming toward the cockpit. Amara closed her eyes briefly, memories flooding back. Her father, Captain William Taylor, coming home exhausted from fighting the same battles decades ago. Being asked to prove he was a pilot repeatedly. Being mistaken for janitorial staff despite his uniform. His voice echoed in her mind, always maintain your dignity, Amara. They can take a lot of things from us, but never let them take that. Minutes later, the cockpit door opened, and Captain Thomas Jenkins emerged, his expression severe. He surveyed the cabin before focusing on Amara. Ma'am, I understand there's a problem, he said, his tone making it clear he'd already decided who was at fault. Yes, there is, Amara replied. I've been subjected to discriminatory treatment by your cabin crew. Jenkins cut her off with a raised hand. My flight attendants tell me you've been disruptive and combative. I need you to understand that interfering with a flight crew is a federal offense. Captain, with all due respect, Richard interjected, that's not what happened. Your crew has been treating this woman differently from every other passenger in first class. Jenkins barely glanced at Richard. Sir, I appreciate your concern, but I need to handle this situation. Turning back to Amara, Jenkins continued, I'm giving you a choice. You can either accept the meal you've been provided and cause no further disruptions, or we can have law enforcement meet this aircraft upon arrival. Amara met his gaze steadily. I understand, Captain. I'll accept the meal. Jenkins nodded curtly, seemingly satisfied that his authority had resolved the situation. As he turned to leave, Amara added, and I'll also be filing a formal complaint regarding the discriminatory treatment I've experienced on this flight. The captain paused, then continued to the cockpit without responding. For the remainder of the meal service, Amara sat silently with the untouched economy meal before her. Vanessa and Gregory deliberately avoided her section, providing no drink refills or checking if she needed anything, while lavishing attention on the other first-class passengers. Several passengers, however, made a point of catching Amara's eye and offering supportive nods or apologetic smiles. The older woman across the aisle discreetly passed her a business card with a note scribbled on the back, happy to be a witness. What they did was wrong. Richard leaned forward from his seat. I've never seen anything like this, he whispered. I fly all the time, and this is. I don't even have words. Unfortunately, I have words, Amara replied quietly. This happens more often than people realize. As the meal service concluded, Amara reflected on the situation. The discrimination had been blatant, far worse than she'd anticipated. And yet, it had also revealed something unexpected, allies willing to speak up, passengers uncomfortable with the injustice they were witnessing. What none of them knew, including the increasingly hostile cabin crew, was that everything had been recorded. And Amara Taylor was not just a passenger to be dismissed or intimidated. She was the reckoning that Horizon Airlines never saw coming. For the final hour of the flight, a tense silence enveloped the first-class cabin. The flight attendants performed their duties with rigid professionalism, completely ignoring Amara while attending to other passengers. The economy meal sat untouched on her tray table, a visible reminder of the discrimination she had experienced. Several passengers approached Amara discreetly during trips to the lavatory, offering words of support and contact information. A middle-aged woman slipped her a business card, whispering, "I'm an attorney. What they did was illegal. Call me if you need a witness." Richard Cooper had become increasingly troubled by what he'd witnessed. As the aircraft began its descent into Chicago, he leaned forward. "I fly Horizon twice a month for business," he told Amara quietly. "I've never seen treatment like this before, but maybe I just wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry this happened to you." Amara nodded appreciatively. "Thank you for speaking up. Most people don't." "I should have said more," Richard admitted. I couldn't believe what I was seeing." As the plane touched down at O'Hare International Airport, Captain Jenkins's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Chicago. Local time is 11:42 a.m., and the temperature is 72 degrees. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until we reach the gate and the seatbelt sign has been turned off." There was a brief pause before he continued, his tone noticeably different. "I've been informed that we'll have some additional personnel boarding before deplaning. We ask for your patience during this process." Amara exchanged glances with Richard, who raised his eyebrows questioningly. She remained silent, sensing what was coming. The aircraft pulled into the gate, but the seatbelt sign remained illuminated. Minutes passed. Passengers began to murmur with confusion and impatience. Finally, the cabin door opened, and two uniformed police officers boarded the plane. Officer Duncan Williams and Officer Robert Sullivan moved purposefully into the first-class cabin, directed by Andrea, who pointed directly at Amara. "That's her," Andrea stated loudly. "She's been disruptive throughout the flight, refusing to comply with crew instructions." Officer Williams approached Amara's seat. "Ma'am, we've received a complaint from the flight crew. I need to ask you a few questions." Before Amara could respond, Richard stood up. "Officer, I was sitting right behind this woman the entire flight. She did nothing wrong. The crew discriminated against her repeatedly. Other passengers joined in. I saw it too," called the older woman across the aisle. "They gave her an economy meal while everyone else got first-class service. They told her to go to the back of the plane where her kind belonged," added another passenger. Officer Sullivan looked increasingly uncomfortable as more passengers spoke up, contradicting the crew's account. Officer Williams turned to Andrea, his expression skeptical. "Ma'am, it seems there are multiple witnesses disputing your version of events." Andrea's face flushed. "These passengers don't understand the situation. She was interfering with our duties and creating a hostile environment." "By asking why she was given a different meal?" Richard challenged. Officer Williams turned back to Amara. "Ma'am, may I see your identification, please? Has this story made your blood boil yet? Comment number 1 if you would have spoken up like Richard did, or number 2 if you think Amara handled the situation perfectly. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're eager to see justice served, and subscribe to never miss these powerful true stories. What do you think will happen when Amara reveals her true identity? Let's find out. Amara reached into her backpack and removed not her regular ID, but her official Federal Aviation Administration credentials. She handed them to Officer Williams, whose eyes widened in surprise. "I'm Senior Inspector Amara Taylor with the Federal Aviation Administration," she stated clearly, her voice carrying through the now silent cabin. "I was conducting an undercover evaluation of this airline following numerous discrimination complaints." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Andrea's face drained of color. Vanessa, who had been standing nearby, took an involuntary step backward. Gregory froze in the aisle, a look of horror dawning on his face. Officer Williams examined the credentials carefully, then handed them back with a respectful nod. Inspector Taylor. I apologize for the misunderstanding. No apology necessary, officer. You were doing your job, Amara replied professionally. She turned to Andrea. I, however, was also doing mine. Captain Jenkins had emerged from the cockpit during the exchange, his face a mask of confusion that quickly morphed into alarm as he realized the situation. Inspector Taylor, he stammered, there seems to have been a misunderstanding. If there were any service issues during the flight, this wasn't a service issue, Captain, Amara interrupted, her voice firm but controlled. This was a clear case of racial discrimination, witnessed by multiple passengers and documented in its entirety. She touched her necklace meaningfully. Understanding dawned on Andrea's face as she realized the pendant Amara had been wearing was more than jewelry. You recorded us. That's a violation of privacy. Actually, Amara corrected, federal agents are authorized to record evidence of violations of federal law, which is exactly what occurred on this flight. 49 U.S.C. Section 40127 prohibits discrimination by air carriers, as I mentioned earlier. The cabin remained silent as the implications sank in. Passengers watched in stunned disbelief as the power dynamic shifted completely. I'll need the names of all crew members involved in today's flight, Amara continued, retrieving a small notebook from her bag. And I'll need Horizon's station manager to meet me at the gate immediately. Captain Jenkins nodded quickly. Of course, Inspector. I'll call ahead right now. As the reality of the situation settled over the cabin crew, their expressions ranged from shock to fear to, in some cases, shame. Gregory stared at the floor, unable to meet Amara's eyes. Officers, Amara addressed the police, thank you for your assistance. I won't be filing any charges against these individuals at this time, but I will be conducting a thorough investigation into Horizon Airlines practices. The police officers nodded and prepared to exit the aircraft. As they turned to leave, Officer Sullivan paused. Inspector Taylor, would you like us to wait for you at the gate? Just to ensure there are no further misunderstandings. Amara considered the offer. That won't be necessary, but I appreciate the thought. As the police departed, the captain announced that passengers could now deplane. Most remained seated, however, watching the drama unfold with rapt attention. Richard Cooper approached Amara as she gathered her belongings. Inspector Taylor, I'd like to offer my contact information. I want to provide a statement about what I witnessed today. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. That would be helpful, Amara replied, accepting his business card. One by one, other passengers came forward, offering their names and contact details, eager to support her investigation. The solidarity was touching, but Amara's mind was already shifting to the next phase of her work. As she prepared to deplane, Andrea made one last desperate attempt. Inspector, please understand, this was all a misunderstanding. We had no idea who you were. Amara fixed her with a steady gaze. That's precisely the problem, Ms. Simmons. You shouldn't treat anyone the way you treated me today, regardless of who they are or what they look like. With that, she walked off the aircraft, head held high, into the terminal where a group of anxious Horizon Airlines executives had already begun to gather, alerted to the PR nightmare unfolding at their gate. The real work was just beginning. A flurry of activity greeted Amara as she entered the terminal. Horizon Airlines Chicago station manager, Jackson Pratt, was already waiting, flanked by several nervous-looking supervisors. Behind them, a woman in an impeccable suit was hurrying toward the gate, trailed by a man carrying multiple briefcases. Inspector Taylor. Jackson stepped forward, extending his hand. We've been informed of the situation on Flight 1237. I want to assure you that Horizon Airlines takes these matters very seriously. I'm glad to hear that, Amara replied professionally, shaking his hand. I'll need a private room for interviews and access to your staff records immediately. Before Jackson could respond, the woman in the suit reached them, slightly out of breath. "Inspector Taylor, I'm Charlotte Evans, Vice President of Operations for Horizon Airlines. We flew in from headquarters as soon as we were alerted to the situation." Amara raised an eyebrow. "You flew in from Dallas in the 30 minutes since we landed?" Charlotte shifted uncomfortably. "We were already in Chicago for meetings." "Fortunate timing." "Indeed," Amara replied, not believing the coincidence for a second. Someone had likely called ahead while they were still in the air, alerting corporate to a potential problem. "If we could discuss this matter privately," Charlotte suggested, gesturing toward the airline's executive lounge. "Certainly," Amara agreed. "After I've conducted my preliminary interviews with the flight crew." Charlotte's smile faltered. "Perhaps we could talk first. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for any misunderstanding." "This wasn't a misunderstanding, Ms. Evans," Amara stated firmly. "It was discrimination, witnessed by multiple passengers and documented thoroughly. Now, about that interview room." Within 30 minutes, Amara was seated in a small conference room within the airline's administrative area. One by one, she called in the flight crew members, recording each interview methodically. Captain Jenkins was defensive, claiming he had only responded to reports from his crew. "I wasn't in the cabin for most of these alleged incidents," he insisted. "I was flying the aircraft." "And yet," Amara countered, "when you did come to the cabin, you immediately took your crew's side without investigating, threatened a passenger with law enforcement, and refused to listen to multiple witnesses contradicting your crew's account." Jenkins had no response to that. Gregory Scott was the first to crack under questioning. "Look, I was just following Vanessa and Andrea's lead," he admitted. "But yeah, I saw how they were treating you differently. It wasn't right." "Why didn't you say something?" Amara pressed. Gregory stared at his hands. "I need this job. And Vanessa's been here 15 years. Her word against mine." Vanessa Miller remained defiant initially, denying any wrongdoing until Amara played back portions of the recordings. Hearing her own voice making thinly veiled racist comments seemed to deflate her. "I don't consider myself prejudiced," she said quietly. "And yet," Amara replied, "you automatically assumed I didn't belong in first class because of how I look. You denied me the same service you provided to white passengers. You suggested I should be moved to the back of the plane." Vanessa had no response. Andrea Simmons was the most combative, insisting that Amara had misinterpreted everything and that the recording was being taken out of context. "This is entrapment," she argued. "You came looking for problems." Ms. Simmons, "I didn't create the discriminatory conditions on that aircraft. I merely experienced them, as have countless other passengers who filed complaints," Amara countered. "And it's not entrapment when federal agents observe violations of federal law." After 4 hours of interviews, Charlotte Evans requested another meeting with Amara. This time, her approach had changed dramatically. "Inspector Taylor, Horizon Airlines would like to offer you a personal apology and compensation for your experience today," Charlotte began, sliding a document across the table. "We're prepared to offer a generous settlement if you would consider resolving this matter quickly and discreetly." Amara didn't even glance at the paper. "Ms. Evans, I'm not here as an individual seeking compensation. I'm here as a federal inspector investigating violations of civil rights laws. This isn't something you can settle with a check." Charlotte's expression hardened slightly. "Inspector, we all want what's best for the industry. Surely we can find a resolution that doesn't involve dragging Horizon's name through a public relations nightmare." "What's best for the industry is accountability," Amara replied. "And what's best for your passengers is equal treatment regardless of their race." Realizing her approach wasn't working, Charlotte switched tactics. "What exactly do you want from us?" "I want full access to all passenger complaints regarding discriminatory treatment for the past 5 years. I want your internal investigation reports on those complaints. And I want your company's written policies regarding diversity and inclusion training for flight crews. Charlotte hesitated. That's a lot of confidential information. It's all information the FAA has authority to request under 14 CFR Part 119, Amara stated. I can get a formal order if necessary. That won't be necessary, Charlotte replied quickly. We'll cooperate fully. What followed was 3 days of intensive investigation. Amara set up a temporary office in Chicago, working late into each night reviewing the materials Horizon reluctantly provided. The pattern she uncovered was damning. Over 200 discrimination complaints had been filed against Horizon in the past 5 years, with a sharp increase in the last 18 months. The airline's internal investigations had dismissed nearly all of them as unsubstantiated or misunderstandings. More troubling were the internal emails Amara discovered between senior staff members, discussing what they called passenger profiling for service optimization. Prioritize high-value travelers, one email from a director of customer experience read. You can identify them by dress, behavior, and yes, demographics. Let's be honest about who's paying our premium fares. Another email, from a training manager to new hires, advised, when the cabin is full and resources are limited, focus your attention on passengers likely to be frequent flyers or decision makers. Use your judgment about who fits that profile. While none of the emails explicitly mentioned race, the implication was clear, especially when combined with the statistical evidence showing black passengers were 3 times more likely to report service issues in premium cabins. On the 4th day of her investigation, Amara received a call from Director Brooks at FAA headquarters. Taylor, you've stirred up a hornet's nest, he said without preamble. Horizon's general counsel has been calling our legal department, making noise about investigative overreach and entrapment. Sir, with respect, what happened on that flight was textbook discrimination, and the evidence I've gathered since suggests it's a systemic issue, not isolated incidents. I believe you, Brooks assured her. But they're bringing political pressure. Senator Wilson is on their board of directors, and he's making calls. Amara gripped the phone tighter. Are you asking me to back off? Hell no, Brooks replied emphatically. I'm telling you to make your case airtight. They're going to fight this hard, and I need you prepared for the blowback. After hanging up, Amara stared out the hotel window at the Chicago skyline. The airline was mobilizing its resources against her, legal, political, and probably media relations next. She needed to strengthen her position. She picked up her phone and dialed Richard Cooper's number. Mr. Cooper. This is Amara Taylor from the flight. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to make an official statement about what you witnessed. Richard didn't hesitate. Absolutely. And I've been talking to other passengers. There are at least 6 of us ready to go on record. Next, Amara reached out to advocacy organizations that had previously filed complaints against airlines for discriminatory practices. She connected with Black aviation professionals who shared their own experiences, building a comprehensive picture of industry-wide issues. By the end of the week, passenger videos of the incident had leaked online, going viral across social media platforms. #Horizon Discrimination was trending, and the airline stock had dropped 11% in 3 days. Charlotte Evans requested another urgent meeting. This has gotten out of hand, she said, her composure finally cracking. The videos don't show the full context. We're being trialed by social media. The videos show exactly what happened, Amara replied calmly. And they're consistent with dozens of other passenger experiences I've documented. Charlotte leaned forward, her voice dropping. Inspector Taylor, be reasonable. This could damage your career as much as our airline. We have friends in Washington who won't appreciate the FAA targeting a major carrier this way. It was a thinly veiled threat, and they both knew it. Amara smiled thinly. Ms. Evans, let me be clear. Threats won't work with me. I've documented everything, including this conversation. If anything happens to my investigation or my career, multiple copies of my findings will be released to media outlets and congressional oversight committees. Charlotte blanched. That wasn't a threat. Good, Amara replied, standing to leave. Then we understand each other. I'll have my preliminary report ready for your review by Monday. As she walked out, Amara knew the real battle was just beginning. Horizon Airlines wouldn't go down without a fight. But neither would she. The polished conference table at FAA headquarters reflected the tense faces gathered around it. 1 week after the incident, Director Benjamin Brooks had called an emergency meeting with Horizon Airlines executives. Amara sat at his right hand, her evidence meticulously organized in folders before her. Across the table, Horizon Airlines CEO Walter Phillips maintained a mask of corporate confidence, flanked by Charlotte Evans and a team of attorneys. Their body language betrayed their nervousness, despite their expensive suits and practiced expressions. "Thank you all for coming," Director Brooks began. "We're here to discuss the findings of Inspector Taylor's investigation into discriminatory practices at Horizon Airlines. Inspector, please proceed." Amara opened the first folder. "Over the past week, I've documented a pattern of systematic discrimination against black passengers on Horizon flights, particularly in premium cabins. This isn't about one incident or one crew, but rather a corporate culture that enables and implicitly encourages racial profiling." She methodically presented her evidence, statistical analysis showing disparate treatment, internal emails revealing problematic policies, testimonials from dozens of passengers, and the damning recordings from her own experience. "Most troubling," Amara continued, "is the company's response to these complaints. Of 212 discrimination reports filed in the past 5 years, 209 were dismissed without meaningful investigation. The pattern suggests Horizon is more concerned with protecting its image than addressing discriminatory behavior." CEO Phillips cleared his throat. "Inspector Taylor, while we take these allegations seriously, I believe you're misinterpreting standard industry practices. Our service protocols are designed to prioritize efficiency, not discriminate. Is it efficient to serve every white passenger in first class a premium meal while providing a black passenger with economy class food?" Amara countered. "Is it efficient to repeatedly check a black passenger's boarding pass while allowing white passengers to pass unchallenged?" Phillips shifted uncomfortably. "Individual employee actions don't reflect our corporate values." "On the contrary," Amara replied, sliding another document across the table. "This internal training memo explicitly instructs staff to make service judgments based on who they believe belongs in premium cabins. While it doesn't explicitly mention race, the implementation clearly results in racial discrimination." The CEO glanced at the document, then to his legal team. One of the attorneys leaned forward. "Director Brooks, we believe Inspector Taylor's investigation has overstepped regulatory boundaries. The FAA's mandate covers safety and operational standards, not customer service practices." "Discrimination isn't a customer service practice," Brooks replied sharply. "It's a violation of federal law under 49 U.S.C. Section 40127, which explicitly prohibits discrimination by air carriers. The FAA has clear authority to investigate and sanction violations." The tension in the room escalated as Phillips attempted a new approach. "We recognize there may be isolated incidents that require attention. Horizon is prepared to implement additional diversity training for our staff and review our service protocols." Amara met his gaze steadily. "With respect, Mr. Phillips, diversity training won't address the systematic issues we've identified. What we're proposing is a complete overhaul of how your airline handles these matters, beginning with accountability for the discrimination that has already occurred." She outlined a comprehensive set of required changes. Independent oversight of discrimination complaints, transparent reporting of incidents, structural changes to service protocols, substantial penalties for the violations already documented, and potential suspension of certain routes if compliance wasn't achieved. Phillips' face flushed with anger. "This is regulatory overreach. These demands would cost millions and imply an admission of wrongdoing that could expose us to countless lawsuits. Perhaps you should have considered that before fostering a culture where discrimination was tolerated, Amara replied calmly. Charlotte Evans intervened. Director Brooks, surely we can find a middle ground. Horizon values its relationship with the FAA and wants to resolve this matter cooperatively. The middle ground, Ms. Evans, Brooks responded, would have been addressing these issues when they were first brought to your attention years ago. Inspector Taylor's experience was merely the culmination of a long-standing pattern your company has ignored. The lead attorney leaned forward. Director, before this goes any further, I should inform you that we're prepared to challenge any punitive measures in court. We have concerns about Inspector Taylor's methodology and potential bias in this investigation. The implied threat hung in the air. Amara remained unfazed. You should know, she said quietly, that Richard Cooper and 6 other passengers from that flight have signed sworn affidavits detailing what they witnessed. Additionally, 3 of your own flight attendants have provided statements confirming the discriminatory practices I've outlined. They were on record as of yesterday. This revelation visibly shocked the Horizon team. Phillips whispered urgently to his attorney. Furthermore, Amara continued, Congressman James Lewis has scheduled hearings next month on discrimination in commercial aviation. I've been asked to testify, along with several affected passengers. The mention of congressional hearings shifted the atmosphere dramatically. Phillips signaled his attorney to stand down. Perhaps, the CEO said, his tone markedly different, we should discuss what reasonable compliance measures might look like. The meeting continued for 4 more hours, with detailed negotiations over each point of the proposed remedies. By the end, Horizon had agreed to most of the FAA's demands, though they continued to resist admitting explicit wrongdoing. As the executives filed out, Director Brooks turned to Amara. They'll fight the financial penalties and try to water down the oversight requirements. This isn't over. I know, Amara replied. But it's a start. The following weeks proved Brooks right. While publicly announcing new, customer service initiatives, Horizon's legal team worked behind the scenes to challenge the FAA's findings. Anonymous sources began feeding stories to friendly media outlets, questioning Amara's objectivity and suggesting she had set up the airline. The pressure intensified when Senator Wilson called a press conference, suggesting the FAA was overstepping its authority and harassing a vital industry player during economically challenging times. Death threats began appearing in Amara's email. Security was increased at her home. Wesley worried constantly about her safety. Maybe you should step back, he suggested one night as they reviewed another threatening message. Let someone else take the lead. Amara shook her head. If I back down, they win. And nothing changes. The turning point came unexpectedly. Richard Cooper, frustrated by Horizon's public denials, released his own recording of the incident to major news outlets. Other passengers followed suit, creating a damning mosaic of evidence that could not be explained away. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Calls for boycotts of Horizon gained traction. The airline's stock dropped further. In a last-ditch effort to salvage the situation, Charlotte Evans requested a private meeting with Amara. What will it take to end this, she asked bluntly. Not token measures. Real changes that you believe would address the problems you've identified. Amara studied her carefully, sensing a genuine shift. Why the change of heart? Charlotte was silent for a moment. My daughter saw the videos. She asked me how I could work for a company that treats people that way. I didn't have a good answer. It was the first genuine moment Amara had witnessed from any Horizon executive. Real change starts at the top, Amara said finally. As long as your leadership views this as a PR problem rather than a moral failure, nothing meaningful will happen. The next day, CEO Walter Phillips announced his resignation, citing personal reasons. Charlotte Evans was named interim CEO, and her first action was to issue a public apology for the incident and announce a comprehensive review of the company's practices. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was progress. And Amara knew her work was far from done. 6 months later, Amara straightened her blazer as she prepared to enter the congressional hearing room. The past half-year had been a whirlwind of activity, challenges, and, finally, progress. Inspector Taylor called Congressman James Lewis as she took her seat at the witness table. "Thank you for joining us today. The committee recognizes your instrumental role in bringing these issues to light." The packed hearing room represented how far the conversation had come. What began as one incident on one flight had catalyzed a national reckoning about discrimination in air travel. "In your assessment," Congressman Lewis continued, "what has changed in the industry since your investigation of Horizon Airlines?" Amara leaned toward the microphone. 6 months ago, airlines treated discrimination complaints as public relations problems rather than moral and legal failures. Today, we're seeing meaningful structural changes across the industry. She outlined the transformation. 20 major airlines had voluntarily adopted new anti-discrimination standards, now officially known as the Taylor Standards, within the industry. These included transparent reporting of incidents, independent review of complaints, and substantial consequences for verified discrimination. Horizon Airlines had undergone the most dramatic changes. Under Charlotte Evans' leadership, the company had replaced half its executive team, implemented comprehensive training programs developed in partnership with civil rights organizations, and established an independent passenger advocacy office with real authority. Most importantly, Amara concluded, we're seeing accountability. For too long, discriminatory behavior had no consequences. That's changing. After the hearing, Amara was surprised to find a familiar face waiting in the hallway. "Inspector Taylor," Vanessa Miller said hesitantly. "I wasn't sure you'd speak with me." Amara paused. Vanessa had been one of the flight attendants most directly involved in discriminating against her on that fateful flight. "I have a few minutes," Amara replied neutrally. Vanessa handed her an envelope. "I wanted to give you this in person." Inside was a handwritten letter. Amara read it silently. "Inspector Taylor, * words cannot express my shame and regret for how I treated you and countless others over my career. I've spent these months confronting truths about myself I never wanted to see. The biases I denied. The harm I caused, * while I can't undo my actions, I wanted you to know they've led to profound change, not just in the airline, but in me. I'm now working with our new passenger advocacy office, using my experience to help identify and address discriminatory practices. * What you did was brave and necessary. You forced me to see myself clearly for the first time. For that painful but essential gift, I thank you, * respectfully, * Vanessa Miller, * Amara looked up from the letter, studying Vanessa's face. The arrogance and hostility were gone, replaced by something that looked genuine. It couldn't have been easy to write this, Amara said finally. Not as hard as facing the truth about myself, Vanessa replied. I always thought racists were obvious. Loud, hateful people. I never recognized how my own assumptions and judgments were just racism in disguise. Their conversation was interrupted by a voice calling Amara's name. Richard Cooper approached with a warm smile, extending his hand. Inspector Taylor, great testimony today. Thank you for coming, Mr. Cooper. And for everything you've done. After the incident, Richard had founded Equal Skies, an advocacy group documenting and challenging discrimination in the travel industry. His background in business had proven valuable in pressuring companies to adopt meaningful changes rather than cosmetic fixes. I should be thanking you, Richard replied. That flight changed my perspective permanently. I can't unsee what I saw that day, and I don't want to. As they parted ways, Amara checked her phone to find a message from Director Brooks. Her promotion to head the new FAA Division of Equitable Services had been officially approved. The division would oversee implementation of the new standards across the industry, with authority to investigate and enforce compliance. 2 weeks later, Amara boarded a Horizon Airlines flight to visit her parents. This time, she traveled as herself, no disguise, no undercover operation, just Senior Director Amara Taylor of the Federal Aviation Administration. As she settled into her first-class seat, she observed a young black girl being escorted to the seat across the aisle by a flight attendant who had been retrained under the new standards. "Can I get you anything before takeoff, Miss Reynolds?" the attendant asked warmly, her genuine smile including both the girl and her mother. "Apple juice, please," the girl replied. "Coming right up," the attendant assured her. "And let me know if you need anything else during the flight." Amara watched the interaction with quiet satisfaction. Small moments, but significant ones. The industry still had far to go, but progress was happening, flight by flight, interaction by interaction. The new head flight attendant, noticing Amara, approached with recognition in her eyes. "Director Taylor, it's an honor to have you on board. I've been through your training program. It's changed how we approach our work." "I'm glad to hear that," Amara replied. "How's implementation going on the front lines?" "Challenging but necessary," the attendant admitted honestly. "Some old habits are hard to break, but we're getting there. Your standards are making a difference." As the plane took off, Amara reflected on the journey of the past year. From that moment of humiliation and anger when Vanessa had sneered at her, to creating industry-wide change that would benefit countless passengers. The personal cost had been high. The threats, the stress, the constant battles, but the results were beginning to show. Her phone chimed with a text from Wesley, "Dad just saw the latest discrimination statistics. Complaints down 62% across all airlines. He's proud of you." "So am I." Amara smiled. Her father, who had faced discrimination throughout his pioneering career as a black pilot, was seeing the industry finally begin to change in his lifetime. The change wasn't complete. It never would be entirely. But as Amara looked around the cabin, seeing the diverse crew working with professionalism and respect, watching passengers of all backgrounds being treated with equal dignity, she allowed herself to feel something that had been rare in her work: hope. Not just hope for the airline industry, but hope that when enough people refuse to accept discrimination, when they document it, expose it, and demand change, systems can actually transform. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but it was possible. And that possibility made all the difference. Amara Taylor's story demonstrates powerful truths about combating discrimination. First, documentation is essential. Without evidence, injustice thrives in shadows. Second, speaking up requires courage but creates ripple effects that inspire others to find their voices. Third, true change demands accountability at all levels, from individual actions to systemic policies. The most powerful insight is that discrimination often hides behind standard practices and misunderstandings. By exposing these disguises, we can confront the uncomfortable truth that racism doesn't always announce itself. It often operates through subtle biases, assumptions, and business decisions that disadvantage certain groups. Amara's journey reminds us that transformation comes through persistence. One person refusing to accept injustice can create institutional change, but it requires unwavering commitment through intense opposition. Her story also highlights the importance of allies like Richard Cooper, who used their privilege to amplify marginalized voices. Finally, we learn that reconciliation becomes possible when people confront their biases honestly. Vanessa's transformation shows that even those who participate in discrimination can change when forced to see the harm they've caused. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wished you had spoken up? Comment, "Never again," if this story inspired you to take action next time. How would you have responded in Richard's position? Share your thoughts below. If this story touched you, please like this video to help it reach others who need this message. Subscribe for more powerful racism stories that expose injustice and celebrate those fighting against it. Share with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for what's right. Thank you for witnessing Amara's journey. Together, we can create a world where everyone is treated with equal dignity.